Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Neville Rehbehn. I am co-executive director and executive editor at Torrey House Press. For those of you who are not familiar with Torrey House Press, welcome. You will know a lot more about us within the next hour or so. I'm going to start off by doing some quick introductions of the faces you see on screen before you, and then turn it over to my marvelous co-executive director, Kirsten Johanna Allen. 2024 has been a bizarre and wonderful and strange and glorious year. By most objective measures, this has been the most successful year in Torrey House Press history. We published some remarkable books that we're incredibly proud of, some of which you will hear from tonight. Our total count, I believe, is that we worked with over 200 writers this year. Between the books we published, books we have on the way, various anthologies, and the Voices for the West writing workshop that we run every February down at near Zion National Park. And our readership and our community engagement continues to grow and deepen and expand, and it's something that feeds our soul every day. So we're thrilled to be able to end the year celebrating with you, to celebrate the power of the written word and the power of storytelling with some of the best writers the West has ever known. I'm going to kick it off with a question, which is, Kirsten, where did this whole thing come from? Can you tell us a little bit about the origin story of Torrey House Press? And we'll take it from there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Will, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a delight to be here with all of you. And I love Will's question. It's just the best. In 2010, my spouse, Mark Bailey, and we decided that there were some voices that we weren't hearing. There were some stories that we weren't reading. We just weren't able to really see what the West is and see what the relationship with the natural world really, really is. And so we decided, without having any publishing experience at all, to start Torrey House Press. Neither of us had publishing experience, but we really felt like there was a gap. There was a cultural gap, there was a regional gap, and so we jumped in. In 2010, we founded the press. In 2011, we published our first titles. In 2012, we got into national distribution with Consortium Book Sales and Distribution. And in 2015, we became a nonprofit because Mark and I couldn't continue to be the nonprofit donors, the exclusive nonprofit donors. We have a mission. Our mission is to publish books at the intersection of literary arts and environmental advocacy. We are not publishing political memoirs or something that is, salacious and wild that is going to get views but doesn't actually contribute to conversation. And so Torrey House Press began. It has been a journey. It has been a love. It's a labor of love. It is a labor of joy as well. I knew back in 2010 that as the only independent literary press in the region, Torrey House Press would need to build community around our mission. That was very clear. What soon became clear is that I didn't fully realize that we would also be building the Torrey House Press mission with our community. We publish books at the intersection of literary arts and environmental advocacy. And we can't do it without having a community of readers and a community of writers and a community of partners and a community of booksellers. It has been a real education and a real joy to have so many people involved in helping Torrey House Press move conversations forward and help communities see more clearly, I think, in many ways, what our relationship with the natural world is, how the West relates to the rest of the United States and to the world. Building community and building mission. That's really what I feel this conversation is about tonight, and I didn't see that coming. What we're going to do is I'm going to kind of invite one of these wonderful folks to talk a little bit about Torrey House Press and read a little bit of something. I would first like to acknowledge our hellos to Terry Tempest Williams, who was not able to join us tonight because her father is in the hospital. Um, Terry, whether you're watching or not, our hearts are with you and with your beautiful dad. I would also like to acknowledge that I'm in Salt Lake City. I am in a house in Holiday that sits on the homelands of Ute, Goshute, Shoshone, and Paiute nations. And I invite each of you to become more familiar with the Native people on whose land you are today and who are part of our world. Become a part of history and present in understanding more about the history of the land where you are. Mission and community. I'm going to shoot it first to Pam Houston and Amy Irvine. In 2010, which feels at once a lifetime ago and a moment ago, they came to us with this idea of a book. It's a book, Airmail, and it seemed like a crazy idea at the time, to publish a book in 2020 with a pandemic and election and so much uncertainty in the world. And for me, it's a real illustration of mission and community today in ways that I didn't expect to be feeling. Um, Pam and Amy, talk to us a little bit about Airmail. How did this beautiful book happen?
Well, Pam and I were asked by Orion Magazine to kick off a series. They were doing letters during lockdown, basically, and I was recently very moved by something I'd read by Pam, and I said I want to exchange letters with Pam. She's right over the continental divide for me, and yet somehow inexplicably we've never met. So we started these letters that turned out to be life-saving for both of us. And as they gained steam, as the pandemic went on and the fears of the election escalated, and we had police officers killing black men, we had all kinds of atrocities happening. It was very it became vital, and suddenly we realized we had something that maybe we could share with others because the letters really sustained us. And then we also realized that maybe this was one way we could get, say, the nice rich white ladies in the fancy mountain towns of the West to really get out and become proactive in the election. Because there are a lot of people in this country that remain very insulated from a lot of what is happening. And we thought we could reach them. And so we went to Torrey House and said, listen, we know we have just weeks to get this done, but what do you think? And Torrey House Press, who also did this with Desert Cabal under impossible circumstances when I wrote that book, said yes, and then bent over backwards to make it happen so that we could get out on what we called the dystopian book tour, because we were one of the first outings. Many of the people who came to the events it was the first time they'd been out of their house in 3 months. And everybody came in masks and red-eyed because there was so much smoke from all the fires in the Four Corners, especially in northern Colorado. And we were literally packing up and leaving for the next event as the fires were closing roads and evacuating communities behind us. So we were under incredible duress. Both of us had, which we didn't know at the time, but we both had pretty severe cases of what we now know was long COVID. And yet we had this amazing turnout of people wanting to connect, and we had Torrey House Press at our backs. And it made us feel like it made me realize that the only way we get through this strange new world that we're in is truly together. And it was kicked off. Our first stop on that tour was at Hell's Backbone Grill in Boulder, Utah. And Blake and Jen hosted us, and Kirsten came over the hill, and they put out flowers, and Kirsten just reminded us that we had lavender shortbread cookies and rosemary lemonade. And it was sunny and beautiful, and people were all out on the lawn. And it was like, we can do this together. Like, we can nourish and nurture one another and survive these times. Now, I want to say something else, which is Torrey House Press is really the only press doing this in the West in the way that they are. And earlier this year, the New York Times put out a list of the 100 most important books in the 21st century. I was so interested to see that list because I have so many books I've loved that have been put out since 2000. There wasn't a single Native American writer on there. There wasn't a single story about the West. There wasn't a story about the environment except for Richard Powers' The Overstory. That was the only one out of 100 books. So we've backslid in that way. Torrey House Press has never been more vital, and we're headed into a wild ride these next 4 years, and we'll need Torrey House Press more than ever. So I hope everybody here can donate to their end of year campaign because they will be carrying a lot of us through and they will be publishing the stories that need to be heard and a tremendous amount of new diverse voices coming out that are the stories we need now. Want to add anything, Pam?
Yeah, just briefly. The one thing that you didn't say was, so we turned in our letters to Orion magazine, but we had sort of fallen a little bit in love in a kind of a pen pal girly way. And so we decided to keep writing. And I think that's just an important part of the story. Like that Orion got us started, we turned in our 6,000 words or whatever, and then we just kept writing because that connection through language and through story, we were telling each other our stories. We'd never met. And, you know what, we would get an email and we'd turn right around and write it back. And so over the course of real lockdown, which was like basically March, April, and May, we were writing letters together. And it was the end of that process where we were like, okay, this is something, and there's an election coming, and this might matter. And that's when we reached out to Kirsten. I just wanted to reiterate that. And it was insane that Kirsten said yes, because it was May. It was May, and the book had to come out in September to be to influence the election. So that's just an example of the way Torrey House says yes. And I'll have a little more to say about that after we read concerning my book Without Exception. But for now, that'll do it.
So we're going to share the last two letters in the book. And I'll start with mine, which I wrote on May Day. So we were well into the letters then. Dear Pam, I dreamed last night that an ex had his hands around my throat, a man in the waking world who had done the same. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I woke thinking, they are gunning for a persistent chokehold. Depress our oxygen levels so we aren't clear-headed enough to locate the North Star when it's hanging there in the inkwell of night sky, dazzling as ever. So we can't take in air enough to walk toward it for as many miles as it takes to arrive in a healthier, kinder world. There are bad guys out there who will read our letters and say terrible things about us, and they did. There will be threats, dismissals, or worse. Certainly, there will be those who won't consider this real writing. But even a lot of the good guys out there will read this and bristle. They will push back and dismiss the fact that sexism is a condition of maleness, just as racism is a condition of whiteness, something we should be looking out for, apologizing for, and making amends for the rest of our lives. Those with the wealth and entitlement inherited from forefathers who built fortunes using enslaved Black people, who acquired land by killing Native people, who turned around and built the factory farms, the skiing golf resorts, the Amazon warehouses, the coal-fired power plants, the hunting safaris, and gated communities. But they also founded the environmental movement, and in the process, they defended an idea of Western wilderness that was romanticized and chauvinized by John Wayne, Cormac McCarthy, Edward Abbey. And until we come clean about that, until my liberal environmentalist friends stop trying to take me down at the dinner table by telling me that the story I want to write is irrelevant, uninteresting, and incapable of changing the world, their hands also grip our throats. Last night, I reread Cowboys Are My Weakness. I confessed earlier in the book that when I first read it years and years ago that I threw it against the wall. So I'm coming back to it now. It is such a saber slicing through the story that is all is well between women and men, that we are enlightened enough to meet one another in bed, in the wilderness, in the halls of Congress, in a dark alleyway, or in the driveway on equal ground. Sadly, your first book is as relevant several decades later. Now I see why I first threw the book against the wall, because I envied that at that young age, you had enough of yourself to push back against the lone white male narrative. During those years, I was leading hard climbs, running rescues, and guiding my squad out of wildfires that had turned on us, but I was lost in a story that wasn't my story. It would be several decades before I found my own. When my child was young, I stole away for a ski on the mountain that presides over our mesa, just the dogs and me. I meant to follow a large open draw, but a herd of mostly pregnant elk cows had bedded down in my path. I skirted them by plunging into thick timber, and while I was in the forest, the sky clouded. The wind picked up and covered my tracks, and I got totally turned around. It grew late, and there wasn't a landmark to aim for, not even the slant of sun. The dogs paced in circles and stared at me, expectant. I wished then, I confess, for a father, a spouse, a bishop, a therapist, to show me the way out. But the wish was a fleeting one, a kind of flash fiction, and an insane one, because what else do you call it when you hand over your agency, your fate, to another person? Men don't often ask for directions, and that is another way I've been lost with them. But this is when I looked at Pablo and Ursa, my two crazy cow dogs, and said, "Go load up." They spun around and headed off in the last direction I would have chosen, but I skied after them, knowing they would obey my command to head for the car and launch themselves through the open hatchback. It was a race in the twilight, but sure enough, we found the vehicle. In dreams, there are not only monsters who want to strangle you, there are dogs who listen when you speak. Carl Jung called them psychopomps, beings that if you are lost and ask for help, will lead you to God. Dogs listen in the woods too, and they'll lead you to safety every time. If home proves to be a place you cannot breathe, the dogs will follow you when you leave that story. So will those velvety herds of elk cows and the forests, the elders and saplings and every tree in between. If the guns come for us, Pam, grab your pen and notebook, your bivy sack, your flint and steel. Climb above tree line on your side of the Great Divide, which is the only thing that should separate our nation during this pandemic. Hell, even if they don't come, head up anyway. I'll meet you there with compass, envelopes, string. We won't go alone. We'll have the dogs. We'll have mentors, students, children. We'll have a few good men who are willing to walk with us, willing perhaps to play supporting characters for a while in the stories that need telling. And we'll have every other good creature flanking us on all sides. Let's bring our ballots too. Let's fill them out and tie them to the tails of ravens passing through. Let's climb the ridge lines with the letters we have written to one another and cast them into the clear blue sky. Then let's toss that compass into some deep, icy ravine that never sees the light of day, because already we know exactly where we're headed. In fierce and loving sisterhood, Amy. P.S. You have proved to be another one of my favorite animals, and we've yet to meet in person.
Pam, you're muted. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. It was wonderful to hear that again. It's been wonderful today to revisit this book. This is my answer on May 7th. Dear Amy, your letter made me think of one of my favorite short stories, Ursula Le Guin's Sir. I wonder if you know it. The story, published in 1982, set in 1909, chronicles a successful all-woman expedition to the South Pole, during which, among other things, one of the explorers delivers a baby. The story stays with me because after the women overcome every hardship to finally reach the pole on December 22nd, 1909, and discuss leaving some kind of mark or monument, a snow cairn, a tent pole or flag, they decide against it because there seemed no particular reason to do so, because anything they were was insignificant in the face of that great landscape. As they get ready to leave the pole and head back to base camp, one woman asks, "Which way?" And another answers, "North." The narrator tells us she is glad they are leaving no marker. For some man longing to be the first might come someday and find it and know then what a fool he had been, and it might break his heart. I love this passage, not only because it explains my whole life to me in the world of wilderness guiding, in the world of publishing, but also for the humor in that one-word answer. If there was an all-woman expedition that got to the South Pole before Amundsen's team, I bet they laughed a lot along the way. What I always used to say about my years as a river and hunting and backpacking guide was this: I never wanted to be better than the men at the outdoors. I just wanted to be good enough that they would invite me along, good enough that I could keep up. Ideally, I'd continue, they would forget I was even there. I'm not sure what to even say about this now, given all our letters have covered. Way back in graduate school, in the heyday of deconstruction, I wrote a paper on Jacques Lacan's assertion that women, by virtue of not having a dick or phallus, as he would have said, understand far better than men the truth of non-possession. The man who taught the class told me, during office hours, I wasn't smart enough to write that paper, proving more or less Lacan's point. I went ahead and wrote the paper and got an A, a thing that professor was famous for not giving. The same man, after Cowboys Are My Weakness came out, told me I was glorifying an archaic form of masculinity. I noted, internally only, that he was an archaic form of masculinity himself. One more thing about me. When things are going relatively well in the world and in my life, I can fall down a disaster wormhole like nobody's business. But when the shit hits the fan for real, what I realize I cannot live without is hope. Your silence will not protect you, Audre Lorde says from the front of a t-shirt I have worn until it is threadbare, when I am not wearing the other one with a quote from Lydia Yuknavitch, "I am not the story you made of me." 2 days after my mother gave birth to me by cesarean, she wanted to go to a party. She was still in the hospital, but a little invasive surgery never kept my mother from a good time. She wheeled herself down to the maternity ward bulletin board and got Martha Washington's name off the list dedicated to newborn babysitting. Martha came to the hospital and watched me that night, miraculously fell in love with me, and didn't really leave until she died when I was 20. Martha taught me to swim, read, ride a bike, to hold open doors for my elders. She taught me generosity is its own reward, always, and that the failure of the imagination has caused a scourge upon the earth. Most importantly, she taught me to always, always say yes to the world. This morning on the dog walk, I realized the thing I am afraid of, far more than I'm afraid of dying a breathless COVID death, far more than being shot in the face by a camel-wearing MAGA dude, is becoming a person who says no to the world, becoming a person who doesn't go out or hike out or speak out because prudence and my survival instincts tell me I should not. That would be the bad guys winning. That would be the bad guys winning most of all. This administration can take so many things away from us. Our safety, our healthcare, our independence, our contraceptives, our freedom of movement, our livelihoods, our clean air and water, and inevitably, probably sooner than later, our right to speak. But it cannot keep us from saying yes to the world. We have not one single thing to lose by believing even now that we can build the world we want to live in, and we must, because time is short and inaction is death. Fighting for the earth and each other will be the only way to feel how alive we still are. So let's save the post office. Let's win the election. Let's win all the elections. Let's downshift and tap into the power I know you know we have. The strength we feel when we put our feet on hard dirt or words on these pages. Let's tend to the weary, the grieving, the hungry, to all those the system is rigged against. The earth is our ally. She always has been. She understands the truth of non-possession. In fact, she wrote the book on it. Thank you for these letters, Amy. I hope there will be 1,000 more. I will walk now to the back of my property where the wetland is overflowing, breathe the clean air, and wait with a piece of string and this letter. Here I am now, my eyes trained on the ridgeline to the west. In everlasting sisterhood, Pam. That was fun. That was so much fun to read. I miss my letters with Amy Irvine. Anyway, I just wanted to say one quick thing about Torrey House and community before I pass it over to Blake. But first, I want to mention that Amy and I had our coming out party for this book with Blake. And then I also had my coming out party with my book Without Exception at Blake's. So Blake feels as much as part of Torrey House and our experience there as anyone on earth, not to mention all the beautiful and good things she does in her community and for the world. So I'm delighted to be here with her tonight as well. But I'm not going to talk very much about With Exception, except to say that I wrote this little book about, and I say little, they're little, like airmail, about my experience with abortion, my mother's experience with abortion, the history of abortion in this country, and everything I could find out about abortion in a short enough time so the book would come out to influence the 2024 election. And, you know, we all know what happened in the 2024 election. But I will say two things. One is that I spent all of September and October in rooms full of women and the men who support them and people of all genders who wanted very much to support personhood for all. And those were wonderful communities. They were incredible. It was an incredibly fast-packed book tour, but I can't even imagine how I'd be feeling right now if I did not have the experience of all of that love and women crying and laughing and high-fiving each other and shouting and whispering and looking at the door, all of the things we did in those rooms together. It was so powerful. And I will also say that there were 14 women's reproductive rights initiatives on the ballot across the country. And even though there isn't much good news from this election, 13 of those passed, even in red states, even in states that voted for Trump to protect abortion in one way or another, mostly to enshrine it in the state constitution. The only state where it didn't pass was Florida, and that required a 60% vote, and they got 57.6%. So anyway, that kept me from wanting to kill myself after the election. The other thing I want to say just really briefly about Torrey House Press and my experience there, I have said in this sort of Zoom room before, I won't go into it in detail, but I have said many times that Torrey House has healed my relationship with publishing. And what I mean by that is that a lot of us in this room have published with major houses in New York. And all I really want to say is this essential difference that I have found, which more and more it seemed over the years that I published in New York, that that New York publishers allow the making of the art so that they can make the money. And at Torrey House, they raise the money so that we can make the art. And it's such an essential difference. It's such an essential difference. And I think it's why so many of us got into art making in the first place. And I'm so grateful to be part of that. And so I hope you'll consider that and consider making a donation to the end of the year campaign so Torrey House can keep doing what they do.
Pam, Amy, thank you for everything, and especially for airmail. I mean, what a delight to revisit this book that seems so timely today. Here's a little peek at these two covers that look awfully nice together. Airmail from 2020 and Pam's Without Exception that came out this year. Both of these books are about building community, and they're about driving change. And that that takes us right to Blake Spalding, who with her business partner Jen Castle drive change through love and through food at Hell's Backbone Grill in the tiny little town of Boulder, Utah. I am super fortunate to spend a lot of my time in Torrey, which is just over the mountain from Boulder. And it's a real, I always feel so fed and so nurtured when I go to Hell's Backbone Grill and Blake and Jen do their wonderful work and take care of me, as well as being a fantastic chef. Blake is also an activist and she's a writer. And in 2018, when Amy Irvine was doing Desert Cabal, Amy and I talked about how do we position this book? This is both a tribute and a talking to Edward Abbey. And how do we place this in the time and in the conversation today? And we quickly, Amy and I decided that having Blake Spalding give us a foreword and Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk provide an afterword was the most wonderful way to serve and deliver Amy's beautiful book. So it was a real treat to get to work with Blake as to put this forward together and do some fabulous events and conversations. It feels like yesterday and a very long time ago in 2018 when we were working on Desert Cabal. But I am fortunate every year to get to spend a little bit of time eating Blake's wonderful food and really enjoying and benefiting from her incredible activism work to save the monuments in Utah, the national monuments, especially Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, which is at her doorstep. So Blake, I hand this to you, dear beautiful friend. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Torrey House Press, your experience with activism and storytelling.
Well, thank you so much, Kirsten. Just sitting here, like with everybody who's on this Zoom, I have so much love for all of you. And really, it's Torrey House. I met Brooke and Amy right away when Jen and I started the restaurant back in 2000. They were immediate friends and mentors in many ways, and Terry. And then, later I met Kirsten, and then, through Torrey House Press, I got to meet Craig and Pam. And when I was like in my late 20s, I don't know when Cowboys Are My Weakness came out, but my memory is I wasn't yet 30. I read it and I was like, ugh. I did not throw the book at the wall. I was like, this person gets me. Like, I need to be friends with her. How am I ever going to be friends with Pam Houston? I need to. And then Torrey House Press, you brought Pam and Amy for that dystopian book tour, and that book is so good. And then I got to fall into friend love with Pam as well as everyone else, and Craig and Regina through doing the work with Desert Cabal. Anyhow, just lots of love. And I've met so many amazing people through Torrey House Press, the authors that, aren't here tonight. But I will say, like, we're such fans. On our website at our restaurant, Hell's Backbone Grill.com, we sell, I think, at least 20 Torrey House Press books. And it's just such an honor because really, like, telling authentic stories about place and about the way that places and our lives and the past and the whitewashing of the past and all of it, the whitewashing of the now, for that matter, literally, this is how we can change minds, and by changing minds and opening hearts to the truth and the incredible importance of wild places and indigenous wisdom and populations, and the way that we relate to the lands that we live in now and this planet. Like, this is really it's the best work we can be doing right now, is trying to help people fall in love with the natural world, to remember that we belong on planet Earth, as surely as do the hummingbirds and the, elk. But we belong here, and we need to love this planet so fiercely. And I think the work that Torrey House Press does is bringing all these different voices to show us how to be in right relationship with the planet. It's so weird that it's like countercultural to love the planet, and like almost beyond belief to have the knowing that this planet actually loves us back. Like, it's taken me a lot of my life to really feel the reciprocity, and it's so important, and people are just confused. So these stories, these writers, I'm rambling. Anyway, thank you, Torrey House Press, for what you are bringing forth into the world, and in such a loving, how sort of wholehearted, generative way. Books have always been agents of transformation, or little portals into what could be or what is, and we need them. And so thank you for making beautiful, affordable books in this way, and honoring the voices of the many writers who you're amplifying and helping. So I guess I'm going to read the foreword. Is that right? Is that now? For Desert Cabal. I do want to say, we have these cookbooks, yes. My sister is an author, Lavinia, and I think she's probably listening tonight, but my sister co-writes with Jen and I our books, and my recollection, even though it was quite a many years ago, is that I came up with what I wanted to say, and then my sister is my editor and my helper. And so, Lavinia, if you're out there, shout out, thanks. I can't do it without a good editor, and I'm so lucky to have my good editor be my sister. Terry actually told me that when we were making the first book. She's like, a good editor's everything, So I miss Terry tonight too. Okay, well, so here it is, the foreword from Desert Cabal, which you can get tonight on our website if you want to. Nearly 2 decades ago, I moved to the edge of one of the most rugged and remote landscapes in the American West, Boulder, Utah, bordered by the newly designated Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. I had been a Grand Canyon River cook for 10 years before this, and had learned firsthand the transformative power of time spent in a protected wild landscape combined with a lovingly prepared meal. I had also been an advocate for public lands all of my adult life, largely informed by my obsession with the writings of Edward Abbey. So when the opportunity arose to open a restaurant in southern Utah's Red Rock Country, I seized it joyfully, and I and a friend, another woman, Jen Castle, started a business in a town so tiny and remote that it was the last in the country to receive its mail by mule. Our concept was simple. We wanted to be a warm hearth for the kind of traveler who was seeking an authentic, heartfelt wilderness experience. We would offer a place to gather before and after the journey, a welcoming room in which to be received and fed. No barking. Sorry. It has to be. Of course, it's my dog, right? We were proud to be women business owners in old-fashioned southern Utah, and proud of our work. We were delighted to bring everyone to the table. Deeply committed to our new community and fostering ideas of sustainability, we started a farm and hired locally, paying everyone a living wage. But more than anything, we wanted to help people fall in love with this high mountain desert through the intimate act of feeding them food, literally, of this place. Think of it as culinary activism. Help guests develop a devotion to the land, and they'll be moved to speak and act on its behalf. During my camp cook days deep in the Grand Canyon on the banks of the Colorado River, I had held the hands of visitors who were shaken to the core by the profundity of absolute quiet. I had wiped their tears as they sobbed over the almost unbearable magnitude of beauty. I often asked them to imagine what the state of the place would be today had it not been protected more than 100 years ago. I ask this again, this horrid imagining, only now I ask it of nearly everyone I encounter, and I ask on behalf of the wild, rugged Red Rock country where I live, what will the state of this place be in 50 years if it's not protected? All my life I've fought to preserve wilderness for the sake of wilderness, but my fight is no longer about that. We're talking now about survival, ours and that of the plants and animals and habitats under siege by runaway human destruction. Saving our common home will only happen if we preserve large ecosystems in which whole communities of species, including humans, can flourish. And only if every one of us cares, engages, and takes action. A passage of Abby's runs through my mind like a daily mantra. These are the words I reflect on, the words that help me muster more love, more communal spirit, just when my heart wants to give way to anger. This is a remote place indeed, far from the center of the world, far from all that's going on, or is it? Who says so? Wherever two humans are alive together and happy, there is the center of the world. You out there, brother, sister, you too live in the center of the world, no matter where or what you think you are. End quote. We all deserve to feel that we're at the center of the world, but the center cannot hold for much longer. The planet is heating up, changing faster than living things can adapt, disrupting natural systems and human cultures at an alarming speed. We have a moral imperative to save wild places, not for ourselves, but for the creatures that inhabit them and the indigenous peoples whose forebears made their homes there. And lastly, for the generations to come, who will need a just land ethic in order to survive and thrive. It's up to us to be the ancestors who give those who follow what they will surely need. It won't be easy, but we're unafraid and we know where to start. Many hard battles have been won, many seemingly irreconcilable disputes resolved over a shared meal. At the table, alchemy can occur. At the table, we can be transformed into better versions of ourselves, more civil, more communal, more sustainable. So come to the table. Let us sit, all of us. Let us eat good food and raise a glass to Abby and ponder where we've been and how to proceed. For the desert wilds that Abby knew, really the nation he knew, is no longer. It is indeed a new season in the wilderness.
Blake, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers indeed. Cheers indeed. A new season in the wilderness. It is seasons that mark our lives, isn't it? Here we are all gathered in this season of darkness and quiet in the post solstice between Christmas, New Year's. It's one of my favorite times because I really like the hibernation of it all and the seasonality of it all because it's so extreme. It is we need markers across time, I think, as humans. It just helps us orient. And as I think about in Desert Cabal, Blake, you and Amy and Regina were reaching back in time to communicate, to be in conversation with Edward Abbey. And in Brooke Williams and Terry Tempest Williams' beautiful The Story of My Heart, they're reaching back even further in time to bring the words of Richard Jefferies to us. Richard Jefferies was a 19th century British nature writer, but for as Brooke showed I think both me and Terry, the words of this man are so present today and just what we need to hear. And it was a real delight to be able to work with Brooke and Terry to reach across even a little more time. Brooke, I'd like to hand it to you to tell us a little bit about how you brought Story of My Heart to Torrey House Press. But first, just a note to all of our wonderful participants here. If we have time for some questions, we will address those. Please note any questions in the Q&A feature on your beautiful Zoom screen, and we will take a look at those. Thank you, thank you. Brooke Williams.
Thank you, Kirsten. I'm so honored to be with this group that I really think of as family now. I know we don't see a lot of each other, but it's like it's perfect every time, and I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy about Torrey House Press and what's happened in all these years. And, you know, we're celebrating the 15th anniversary coming up. And I realized that I think we go back almost to the beginning. I'm not sure, but I remember the night we met at I think a fundraiser for some organization. Maybe it was in Park City. I don't remember. And then it turns out that Terry and Mark are cousins going way back, and in fact, may have crossed paths as children at some great aunt's Christmas Eve party occasionally. So it's the Utah game. It's a small world here, and I'm happy that it is. So the story of my heart goes back to a small bookstore slash junk store slash art gallery in Stonington, Maine. Terry and I were there browsing, and we always like to look for books in stores like that. She got stuck in the corner. I was moving up and down the aisles, and I realized that she was stuck in the corner, and I didn't know why. So I finally went up to her. I said, "What are you doing here? You must have found something very important." And she said, "I found this little book. It's called The Story of My Heart. Have you ever heard of it?" I said, "No, I've never heard of it." She said, "It's by this guy, Richard Jefferies. Have you ever heard of him?" I said, "No, I've never heard of him either." But she said, "I think we need to buy it." But it was like $300 or something. It was like a first edition. Maybe it was like $180. I forget. It was a lot of money. And I went up to the counter where there was a sign that said, "All prices are negotiable." And there was an old woman there who was obviously the owner of the store and sitting behind piles of stuff. And she poked her head out, and I said, "Is the price of this book negotiable?" And she said, "Oh, I saw your wife standing in the corner reading it, and she got it out of that particular cabinet, which is 63% off today only." So we figured that we could afford it, and we bought it, and then we spent the next week reading it out loud to each other. And I'm not sure what happened, but something magical happened because Richard Jefferies sort of took over my life for a little while. Terry was very intrigued with the book, but I was obsessed with it in a way that became sort of problematic, to say the least. In fact, one night I went home from to dinner, and there were 3 places set at the table. And I said, "Terry, you got 3 places set at the table. Who's coming?" She said, "Well, Richard Jefferies, he's always here anyway. We may as well feed him." And in fact, that's kind of how it was. I like saw everything through the eyes of this person. And we thought about it, and both of us agreed that this book should not remain in a dusty cabinet in Maine. It should be out in the world, because there were so many parts of it that just really resonated, even though that it was written in the 19th century. So we went to Kirsten and Mark. And by the way, Mark, I hope you're out there. And I just want to tell you how much I honor you as a friend and as a brother, really. And I love you, man. So I hope you're well. So anyway, we went to Kirsten and Mark, and I think it's already been said. Somebody said it was insane that Kirsten and Mark agreed to publish this book, but they did, and they did it really well. And we couldn't figure out how to exactly do it because they originally agreed with us that they would publish the book on the condition that Terry would write the introduction and I would write the afterword. And because of my obsession, I wrote 85,000 afterwards to the book, and obviously that wouldn't fit. So we had to figure out what to do with it. I cut it down significantly, thank goodness, and we ended up putting my explanation of Richard Jefferies' chapter after each chapter. I'm not sure I would do it that way again, but it seemed to work at the time. I felt it was important for at least for me to make sense of why this book meant so much to me. So that's how it turned out. And one thing led to another, and it was published in 2014, which is 10 years ago, we just realized. So that's kind of the 10-year anniversary of this book, too. It was in November. We started out by launching it at Back of Beyond Books in Moab, which was our local bookstore. And many of you know that bookstore. It's now got new owners, but Andy Nettel, who started the bookstore, was a real antiquarian book fanatic. He still is. He loved the idea of us finding this old book because he loves old books. And he said, yeah, I'd love to do the launch. So we got a bunch of people together and we got some books there. And he stood up to introduce us. And as a big surprise, he said, I think it's pretty amazing that Richard Jefferies has chosen Brooke and Terry and Torrey House Press to publish The Story of My Heart, This Generation. And he spun around and he had hidden behind him a stack of books, and he turned and he had a stack of like 25 books. And he said, these are all the books, all the stories of my heart that have been published each generation by separate publishers everywhere. So this book has come out every generation since it was published in the late 19th century, which is kind of magical, I think, because again, it sort of explains my obsession. But it also, I think, puts some importance on Torrey House Press as being a very significant voice in terms of what is going on in the world. And in 1887, this all occurred in England, the inspiration for this book, but it's now worldwide what we care about. And I realized reading over it, a little bit today. I don't know, a lot of you who write may believe this, but I do. Somebody told me once that if you write a book, you better like it because you're going to read it 1,000 times while you're editing it, while you're getting it ready, while you're trying to sell it. And as a result, I haven't really looked at this book much since. But today, because of this event, I picked it up and I started going through it. And a lot of it, I said to myself, wow, I can't believe that I really thought that back then. And other parts of it, I said, I'm not really sure who wrote that, but obviously it was me. So I felt good about it. But I also felt good about the fact that a lot of Richard Jefferies' concerns were my concerns in, the period leading up to the publication. They were his concerns, they're my concerns. I'm more concerned now because a lot of us feel the same way that whatever problems we had in 2014 are sort of pale compared to what we're seeing these days. But what gives me hope is that Richard Jefferies got through it. We got through it before, and we'll just get through it again. And the question is how. And I love the idea of that evolution is not necessarily improvement, but it's adaptation to changing conditions. And we certainly have changing conditions, and our success will be based on how we're able to adapt. And I think we're capable of that. And I really believe that a publishing company like Torrey House Press is at the core of this, because somebody said earlier, nimble. I love that term, nimble. And that's the one big thing that's different from major publishing companies in the East, is that these things can have a really fairly quick turnaround compared to other books, and can respond directly to changing conditions that we're seeing constantly. And I feel like it's an amazing thing these days, because it's not that common and it's so important. So I'm just going to read a short thing. First of all, I just wanted to again reiterate that Terry is with her father. She's really sad that she can't be here, but he's sort of a full-time job right now. He's got COVID. He's 91. It's not easy to have COVID at 91. And it's even less easy to have Terry's father COVID at age 91. In fact, she's there now hoping that now that he's been in the hospital almost 2 days, that he might take his Levi's off, but we're not sure. We're not like betting on that. Anyway, she would really like to be here. She was really inspirational for me in this book, because she just sort of gave me a lot of the space and the advice I needed to respond to Richard Jefferies, and she understood that he and I had this relationship, and she knew that it probably wouldn't last forever, and it was probably important. And as a result, we have this little book. So this is short. It's toward the end, and it's I'm not sure what I was thinking, but I decided I would just sort of intuit Richard Jefferies asking, or me asking him some questions. Toward the end of the book, I had a lot of questions. And so I just sort of imagined that if I voiced those questions, he would answer them. This is me. What are we to do about the changing climate that now threatens life as we know it? Richard Jefferies. In parentheses, I hear a strong, deep voice, almost an echo. I'm convinced that much more can be done, and that the length of time may be almost short. It's hard for me to see in my light. Let me start over. I'm convinced that much more can be done, that the length of time may be almost measurably shortened. There must be much more. There must be things which are present unknown, by whose aid advance may be made. Research proceeds upon the same old lines and runs in ancient grooves. Me. I agree. Our research has many answers to our problems, and none practical enough or political enough or cheap enough. Jefferies. Further research is restricted by the ultra-practical views which are alone deemed reasonable. Remember, experimentation is important, but also limited, as it is built on what was previously found. Me. How do we move beyond the status quo, this assumption that we currently know all we need to know to solve all of our problems? Jefferies. There should be no limit placed on the mind. The purely ideal is as worthy of pursuit as the practical, and the mind is not to be pinned to dogmas of science any more than to dogmas of superstition. Me. What if not science, if not by experimentation? Jefferies. Observation. If the eye is always watching and the mind on the alert, ultimately chance supplies the solution. I still agree with that. Thank you.
Love it, Brooke. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And to Terry, thank you too. Working on that book with the two of you was a total joy for me, and I just cannot believe that it was 10 years ago. The Brooke, you and Terry bring such heart and such activism to all of the work that you do. And it's inspiring. That heart and activism is something that I always think of when I think about Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk as well. Regina Lopez-Whiteskunk, as Will mentioned, is a Torrey House Press board member. She was also a co-founder of the Bears Ears Intertribal Coalition, and she's contributed to many Torrey House Press books over the years. And I'm so grateful to call her my friend. Um, Regina, your piece in the just released Water Bodies. I'm holding up a galley copy because somehow I don't have a finished book in my home. Um, but the book is out. It's a beautiful anthology edited by Laura Paskus, and Regina's piece is one of my very favorites in it. Um, Regina, would you share with us your piece from Water Bodies?
Absolutely. But before I start and share a little bit of that, I do want to share my experience with Torrey House Press. Mind you, I'm also coming to you from beautiful Telluride, Colorado. I get to be in the mountains, so my heart is hitting the reset button. There's nothing like a Ute gal high in elevation. So my experience with Torrey House Press was a pretty amazing one, being that I never thought of myself as a writer. And because of a very dear friend of mine, the late Charles Wilkinson, who got a hold of me and he said, Regina, I need you to write a piece. And I said, I'm going to try to make some time. And some time had gone by. I had offered some testimony in the state legislature in Salt Lake City and didn't have a very good experience. But I also didn't know, because of that experience, it was also going to ignite something in me that would feed the writer. Mind you, this is a young lady who had to write a couple of really quick pieces to graduate high school for her English teacher. So I became very accustomed to writing under pressure. I didn't know that that skill was going to come in pretty handy. But I do have to say, I was very reluctant to engage with the editor-writer relationship. I was pretty... I think I was more afraid of an editor that would change my story. And so I kind of was reluctant to share story in written form. But being a part of the campaign to set out to get and preserve and protect land, I also began to understand my relationship with land and also with the governmental political process and environment. So I was a contributor to Red Rock Stories, and that's how I was first introduced to Torrey House Press and Kirsten. I think one of my first real engagements with Kirsten was meeting her in Washington, D.C. to share this little book with members of Congress and key officials to launch that important aspect and perspective and voice for land. And ever since then, I have been blessed to be a part of a family now that sometimes I was curious. Every time I would write something, I would get a hold of Kirsten and members of Torrey House Press, and I got to know Amy, and so I kind of started to feel like I had my own little group of editors that would just read for me and help me develop my writing at the drop of a dime. So I've been very blessed with that process, and I just feel super, super excited about any opportunity to engage in the process of writing. I was approached about a little over a year ago to contribute an essay on the very important conversation of water. And it was unique because up till this point, I had been pretty much doing a lot of writing in relationship to land and other natural resources, and never really focused like deeply on one aspect of the natural resource. And water was something that had been dear to me. And so I sat and thought about what in my life could I bring to life through some writing. And so I wrote this essay, and I'm going to try to read it. So forgive me if I have a moment where I get a little choked up. It's still pretty dear to my heart. It's titled Water Carrier. In water, I'm surrounded, I'm safe, I'm pure, I'm sacred. I sit watching the beautiful blue shift to orange. I recall a time of long conversations with my parents explaining to me what my responsibilities are to this world and family. It was a Saturday morning when my mother called me into her bedroom, placed me on her bed, and said, "You're becoming a young lady." She said that there are things we do because of our family. I was about to take my place. My grandfather is going to be running a peyote meeting, and he wants me to carry the water in the morning. Oh, I will have to get up early in the morning. What will this entail? What will I need to know? I was nervous. Will I be able to remember all that I need to? I was under the guidance of an elder who would instruct me for the morning. The circular motion, always turning to the right in a clockwise direction and keeping my mind and heart in a good place for the ceremony. Remaining mindful of every movement, I would be carrying a bucket of water when the morning star appeared, and I would wait to be summoned by a whistle blown by the leader of the meeting, my grandfather. I would walk the bucket around the teepee, starting from the east, south, west, north, and back to the east near the door. Becoming a water carrier for a ceremony was scary, but humbling. Water is an element that is necessary for life, but it is also used as a tool to protect and strengthen others. Other humans, animals, birds, insects, and all that is created by our Almighty. I was 9 years old, and I felt like the center of the universe. Overwhelmed with the excitement, I didn't need anyone to wake me. I was lying in my bed when my mother came in my bedroom and announced my grandmother had arrived last night to be with me. I heard a soft voice and then my name in our language, Mama Tapuch. Then her giggle. When she pulled me into an extra long hug, my mother and grandmother asked if I was ready for this. Did I have a choice? In our culture and family, an honor like this is not a choice. I was instructed to put on my floral printed dress with brilliant colored ribbons, moccasins fully adorned with geometric designs, and a matching legging that covered my calves. When my mother finished braiding my hair, I wrapped it with mink and placed my beaded hair ties on my braids. My grandmother placed a scarf over my shoulders. The final article was my belt, and that had a place for a small knife, all pouch decorated with beads of many colors that make up the sunset. My father came through the front door looking for me, saying, "Are you ready?" He took me to the ceremony location just below the mesa, where there was a house with a teepee set up for the ceremony. I lived close to the Ute Mountains, so it was about a 5-minute ride. My father put a silver and turquoise bracelet on my right wrist. Then he shared with me a message from my grandfather. Wear this with strength and grace. My mother put on a pair of silver earrings and wrapped me with a colorful Pendleton blanket with fringes. The Pendleton blanket was of wool with colors of yellow, orange, red, blue, and purple. It was an honor to have a blanket of this type. She instructed me to wear the blanket over my shoulder until I got ready to enter the teepee. Fold it and sit on it when I take my place in front of the door after I place the water bucket directly in front of me. My grandmother painted my face with which made my cheeks feel the earth at sunrise, bitch. She told me how the bitch would protect, guide, and identify me when I'm in sacred motion. With the gentlest touch, paint was placed at the corner of my eyes, on my heart, the center of my forehead, the middle of both my palms, the back of my neck, and a dab on my tongue. She whispered in my ears, "You will do good." They all showed me with hugs and smiles. In the dark, early morning sky, I could see the sparkles in their eyes, like stars leading the morning star into the new day. "Your walk is waiting. You need to go," said my mother. Grasp the bucket and embrace the gentle chill in the early morning. I took a deep breath. I was taking my position as a guardian, as a water guardian voice, taking my position as a Ute woman in my family. Thank you.
Regina, thank you. I've heard you read your piece a few times. I've read it more than that, and it moves me every time. I am so grateful to have worked with you on this book and so many others, starting out with, as you mentioned, that wonderful Red Rock testimony that we took to Washington all those years ago. I guess and we'll keep fighting the good fight. Thank you. Thank you for leading. Thank you for all that you do. You have brought with this piece in Water Bodies together a sense of community and wild places and the elements that make us all up. We are made of these elements. We are the water carriers in so many ways. And it takes me into one of my favorite things about Craig Child's next book, which is called The Wild Dark. It comes out in May. We as humans and everything on our planet, we're made of stardust. We are the result of elements that have created themselves in our universe and are alive in us today. And Craig's explorations of both the night sky in Wild Dark, and of course not the earth in his other books. This is Virga and Bone that he did with us several years ago. Stone Desert, which was the first book he actually published. He also wrote another beautiful one about rock art, but I don't have that one with me. It's called Tracing Time. The elements, and Regina, one of the elements that I think of is family, and connection. And that's what you bring in that story together, as well as this element of water. Craig, tell us a little bit about what brings you here tonight. Your offerings of dark and land and sky and light.
Well, I think what brings me here is what is bringing us all together, which is what you've done. You've created a space for us to exist and join. I find that bigger presses are lonelier places. This is family. Just seeing your faces on my screen here, all of you. It's just like, oh, these are friends and each one of you is, we have such different relationships with each other, and it's just really nice to see all of you together and a place where we can be, we can rubbing elbows with each other here. This isn't something that really that really happens at other presses. This is unique that um, I can't think of another press where I've had a relationship with the other authors like this. And just everybody who's involved with this, it's a magical place, and for the organic nature of what we can produce coming out immediately from the ground. That word nimble, you guys are able to make things happen when they need to happen. And so I deeply appreciate having this place where we can come together and write in this kind of circle. And it's a circle where I feel like the audience is closer in, where sometimes I'm writing for I don't know who, where, and here it's like I'm writing for you. I think I know who is actually reading this. I feel like we're all pulling our chairs up closer and getting around each other, and it's this kind of there's a closer feedback. It's almost live writing at Torrey House Press as opposed to who knows where your story will land. And here it will land with somebody who understands this place, who understands that we are all gathered around a question. Something that you said, Regina, it just made me think of what are our responsibilities to this world, to its people. And that is a question that I think uh, we have to ask at Torrey House Press. You don't have to ask that elsewhere. And when I say our responsibilities to people, I mean people as in animals, people as in plants. And that's not, if I started talking at certain larger presses about people being animals and plants, I would get oh, you're interesting, aren't you? And here I know that in this group that's what people means, is more than just a group of people, and more than just two-leggeds walking around. And Water Bodies, beautiful book. So nice to see that out in the world. I I wrote this. I'm still writing. I should stop writing it, actually. The Wild Dark. If Gray is listening in right now, I hope you haven't checked your email lately, because I'm still ripping and tearing at things. Because I want it to be as good as I can make it. This is a book about dark skies, and and I don't think, Kirsten, you knew this. I didn't know it, and I didn't remember until yesterday where this book actually came from. Is we were driving across the Navajo Nation heading north yesterday, and between Tuba City and Kayenta, and the old Peabody coal conveyor belt that would go over the highway there has been gone for I don't know, 4 or 5 years or something. And that's where this book actually came from, is that we were driving through there right before I proposed it to you, and I went, oh my God, it's gone. That thing that's been there my whole life, that's kind of a marker of, it was part of my world. And I just went, oh wow, we got the sky back. Like it changed the horizon to not have that right in front of us. And that's where I wrote down give back the sky as we drove through there, because I went, oh, wow, I didn't realize that we had taken away the sky by putting this here. We had altered the sky. And then I started thinking about, well, what does this mean to get the sky back? What things have blocked our view? And then I went, oh, light, darkness. We've had so much of the sky removed from us around the world, and this is something that I've thought about a lot. I think a lot of us have. What happened to the night sky? And so this book developed. I think I was with you, Kirsten, just a couple weeks later, going, well, here's what I'm thinking. And you said, go, do that. And I didn't even, I mean, you caught me by surprise because I went, oh, well, let me think about what that would be. And that became this book, which is a journey. It's kind of an adventure journey into darkness from brightness, and the book is set mostly in Nevada, going from the brightest place in Nevada in Las Vegas to the darkest, and it near the beginning of the book, I'm at the Sphere, which is this gigantic light producing LED orb off the strip, and we're there at night. Being drawn to such a spectacle is a pure physical response. So the feeling we had of being on the top of the world makes sense. It's called positive phototaxis, the natural movement of an organism toward light. Not all living things exhibit positive phototaxis, but most do. Lizards, fish, crabs, foxes, frogs do it. Plants lean in, moths are pros, and birds notoriously wheel toward any city, spinning over spotlights and street lamps, as if the maps in their almond-sized brains can't stop saying, turn left, turn left, turn left. This gravitational pull toward the light is aptly termed trapping, and it often leads to the demise of creatures through simple exhaustion or swift predation by opportunistic hunters drawn to the commotion or crashing into windows. Turn on a light, and a fly will enter the room. Fleets of manta rays appear when coastal resorts shine spotlights into the ocean, luring plankton that draw the rays where tourists can swim in crowded, half-awkward underwater ballets. In a forest in the Florida Panhandle, I flashed a headlamp beneath a canopy of loblolly pines, and my field of vision quickly filled with hundreds of tiny green glints, the eyes of wolf spiders orienting themselves toward me. My dad took me to the desert in southern Arizona on a moonless night, and with a spotlight clipped onto a car battery, he lured coyotes, streaks of fur and needle noses darting in close to see what's the matter. On a single summer night in 2019, an estimated 48 million pallid-winged grasshoppers converged on Las Vegas from all directions, more than 30 tons of insects, bodies, wings, and legs saturating the airspace and covering sidewalks. The footage is alarming and mesmerizing. Casino entrances besieged, the upcast skybeam of the Luxor turned into a whirling white static. They came because of the light, drawn just like us. This is one side of the coin, and on the other is the night sky, so untrammeled that it is bright on its own and it casts a shadow. Positive phototaxis crosses all living genres, a code written into the earliest genes where even bacteria expand lightward instead of away. If you'd presented this projection sphere to early Homo sapiens, we would have gathered below it, hooting and hollering, throwing rocks and sticks. We would not have turned our backs to it. Since then, we've learned to temper our flailing and shouting, which is why we remain relatively tranquil, taking pictures of ourselves with this sphere behind us, when what we really want is to flap our wings until they tatter. So this book starts in Las Vegas, and two of us set out on a 200-mile bike trek, an unsupported trek. So we're carrying everything with us, going over ranges and across basins, and the reason I chose biking for this is because it was the right pace, so that every night you could see the difference, that you could count the number of stars or what features are visible. And so it was actually surprising to see how different it was, that by doing it at this pace, by really paying attention to light, you could see the darkness coming on and really saturating. And we only used green or red lights the whole time while we were out. So our eyes adjusted, and it was fascinating to see how it happened over several days, that by the end we weren't using lights anymore. We could feel our way around. We could see in the dark, and And this is several days later. Irvin starts a fire and we stand closely around it, flushing out sparks that land beyond the rock ring we've made. Me using my treaded shoe soles, Irvin, his flip-flops, desert style. We'll scuttle and scatter the rocks come morning. Unintentionally, we're still facing toward Vegas, but it's finally vanishing, becoming a faint nebula of itself. We're not staring directly at it because the rest of the sky takes our attention. Stars are rich and numerous. How could this view be understood as anything but living? They're born bright and hot, most of their lives spent in middle-age stability, like our own sun shining with little variation. Some famously turn blue or red and swell into giants, either erupting in cardiac explosions or shrinking, dimming, and finally going out. What looks like a static field is a problem of time. We'd be led to believe that nothing much changes up there, but we're not around long enough to recognize how stars are drifting and coming on, going out. If our perceptions were set to an astronomical timescale, everything would be in motion as our solar system corkscrews through the Milky Way at 1,000,000 miles per hour. The question of are we alone is answered by a view full of stars. We are so not alone. It isn't funny. So that's this journey into darkness, which I'm, I feel like I'm writing it for this place that I didn't write this. I mean, it's a global book in some sense. It leaves the West, but I'm really writing it for the darkness that we have here, for the skies that are so dark that they're bright. And that's what I saw in this book, was going from brightness to the darkness, was actually going from this crazy Las Vegas brightness to this glowing interplanetary, zodiacal lights shining from above, and that's what exists on this side of the continent. I'm often looking at the two sides going, wow, something really different happened over on that side, and it could come over, and it is coming over. This is the colonization of light, and we have this darkness around us, which is rare, and it's huge. It occupies really large spaces, or sometimes just tiny little dark spots, but it's so crucial. And there were a number of people I talked to, biologists and whatnot, said, of all the problems that we're facing in this world, environmental problems of heavy metals that are almost impossible to get out of soils, this is a problem that is just a switch, and you just turn it off. And so this is a problem that actually can be solved in very simple ways. And I'm honored that you gave me this opportunity to go out and find this and do it. So thank you so much.
Greg, thank you. And as you take us out into the darkness, in the wild dark, into lonelier and lonelier stretches of one of the loneliest places in America, the central wilds of Nevada, you point out we are so not alone. And that is the gift of your writing. That is the gift of this moment, this day. And that is the gift of Torrey House Press. We are so not alone. And I just thank you all for being a part of this community, building this mission to bring books at the intersection of literary arts and environmental advocacy, breathing life into it. You are the beating heart of it. Readers, you are the beating heart of what we do. You make it possible. And we have a lot of fierce work to do as we close out tonight. I raise a glass to all of you. I raise a glass to the leaders who have come before us, who will come after us. We need all of our voices, absolutely. And We are so not alone.